It's one of the world's richest cities at the centre of the global financial industry, and now it's one of the latest slum tour destinations too. On this week's programme, designed in the developing world and big business, now slum tours come to London. Getting away from the gorillas, we head to an unexplored part of Rwanda. And
later on the Fast Track Travel Clinic, airlines that fail to deliver and the prospects for exploring the world's biggest country.
hello and welcome to Fast Track from a very chilly London with me, Fiona Foster. Now, when you're in the heart of London's West End with all its high-end shops and hotels, it's easy to forget that, like all big cities, London is a place of contrasts, where wealth often rubs shoulders with poverty. For some time now, tour operators have been running trips to deprived areas in the developing world, like the slums of Mumbai, for example, or the favelas of Rio. But now those tours are coming to places like London, presenting a view of the city not seen in the tourist brochures or the TV ad campaigns. We sent Krista Larwood on a recent tour of London's East End.
Brick Lane is one of London's most vibrant areas, a colourful hodgepodge of different cultures, all mixed in with scores of street artists, designers and hipsters. And it's always at its busiest on a Sunday, when the famous Brick Lane market appears.
Today, visitors come to this part of London to have a curry at one of the many restaurants or to pick up some cool vintage fashions. But back in the 19th century, tourists descended on this area for a very different reason, and the East End became the birthplace of what we now know as slum tourism.
In the Victorian era, this was the poorest part of London, a great dirty warren of slums. This footage, shot in the decades afterwards, gives us some idea of what it was like. Well-to-do ladies and gents would come here to observe the conditions in which the poorest lived. Some visitors had charitable intentions, others were more interested in visiting the many opium dens and soliciting local prostitutes. A century later, in the 1990s, slum tourism emerged in the developing world. Occupants of the vast townships of South Africa, inner city slums in India, and Brazil's crowded favelas began to see busloads of wealthy Western tourists arriving in their communities.
But in recent years, it seems that this trend has come full circle, returning to urban centres in the West, from cities like San Francisco and Brussels to right here in London's East End, where it all began. Today, I'm going to take a tour that shows the city from a very different perspective, through the eyes of somebody who slept on these streets.
It's what the police call a flashpoint, so you can be stopped and searched for no other reason than you are in a...
Liz WEINER has lived in London for 20 years and has been homeless on and off for most of her adult life. 3 times a week, she hosts a tour that combines history with social issues and her own personal experiences.
Shoreditch Church, or St Leonard's Church. This was built in the 1700s after Christopher Wren did St Paul's. These white churches started popping up. This church used to be somewhere where the homeless people would sleep along the steps, but you can't sleep here anymore. If you read these signs here and here, they say that anyone's stuff found here will be treated as rubbish and you yourself can be moved on by the police if found loitering. It made sense that somebody who had lived amongst the streets might know something about it, and if they didn't, maybe they could attach slightly more of love for that history, as opposed to it being kind of sterile, and because you do feel more attached and more familiar, it's more familiar to you. We don't want to stereotype, and we want people to see the homeless person as an individual, and that's capable of doing a job other than begging for your change on the street. So the flea market would have come all the way down here.
Liz's walk through the East End is one of 5 tours guided by homeless people in key tourist areas across London. And it's all organised by an outreach group called the Sock Mob.
It is the negative connotations of slum tourism that we're fighting against. The guides get 60% of the ticket sales, so the majority of the money goes to the guides. We are building a group that, you know, everyone feels invested in, and the guides also feel that they have some ownership over.
Light and dark, you know. But so, before we
Many
leave,
experts see the Sock Mob tours in London as part of a spike in slum tourism growth across the world.
Slum tourism is growing rapidly at the moment. Jakarta has one now, Thailand has some now, happens in Mexico, in Egypt. Even in London there's the Sock Mob Unseen tours, which, although not a true slum tour in the sense of the word, is a similar form of tourism. So you can really see it's picking up at an incredible pace, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down.
Slum tours have been roundly denounced over the years as exploitative poverty tourism, or poorism, an exercise in objectifying disadvantaged people for the curiosity of visitors.
There were a lot of tours that just had tourists sitting in a bus looking out upon the people, and some of the local people said, yeah, we felt like animals in a zoo being watched at, and that's of course the critique that slum tourism often gets.
But there are signs that the wider tourism industry is increasingly embracing the trade.
Whereas initially there was a lot of negative writing on it, and there still is a lot of negative writing on it, but now there's a counter argument being made that it also can be used as a force for good.
So the question is it always ethical for travellers to take part in a tour that focuses on deprived areas or disadvantaged people? And how can we be sure that tours having some sort of benefit and not making the situation worse?
The biggest challenge for tourists when deciding whether or not to go on a slum tour, and if so, which tour to use, is knowing which ones are genuinely working to support and working in partnership with the local communities, and which ones are just saying that they're doing that because they know that that's probably what tourists want to hear. Have a look at the websites, talk to the tour operators directly, find out about how they work with communities, whether they're linked with community projects. Is there an opportunity to buy products from local vendors, visit community initiatives, go to local bars or restaurants? All these kinds of things help bring very much needed money to the local economy.
It seems that while the trend for more ethical tours is growing, it still pays for travellers to be cautious. But for Liz, there's no question that her tours of London's East End are having a beneficial impact.
I need my umbrella. And it's about empowering people, not belittling them, not saying, listen, hey, poor you, it's a terrible thing. Yeah, this is about making sure that when tourists leave or the customers leave, the guide is benefited in some way, and that the people have kind of been educated in a positive way.
Crystal Larwood reporting from London's East End. And do let us know what you think. Do tours like that help spread the tourism dollar, or do they just help treat the symptoms rather than the causes? Let us know your thoughts at our usual address, fasttrack@bbc.com. Now let's have a look at stories making the news that might affect your next journey.
Revised pedicab regulations in New York should stop you getting a nasty surprise if you decide to take a tour in one of the city's three-wheeled taxis. The rules mean that pedicabs must now charge by the minute with a timer clearly visible. It's hoped they'll stop passengers being stung by extra fees and surcharges. In one infamous case, a family from Texas were charged more than $400 for a journey of just 14 blocks. If you like to get touchy-feely with ancient history, you'll need to go careful from now on at the Colosseum in Rome, as you'll no longer be able to walk up and touch the walls. A protective metal fence will ring the building from next year to ensure tourists aren't hit by falling bricks while building works are carried out. The restoration will take almost 3 years and cost more than $30 million. Scaffolding will also cover the brickwork, but you'll still be able to catch a glimpse of the ancient amphitheatre, as only one part will be covered at a time. Beaches across Sydney have been hit by blood-red algae, which has closed sections of the coastline, including Bondi Beach. If you're tempted to take a dip, the advice is to avoid the water until the algae clears, as it can cause irritation to eyes and skin. And speaking of irritation, is there anything more frustrating than your in-flight film being cut off when you're coming into land? Well, that could be a thing of the past on one airline at least, as British Airways say their in-flight entertainment screens will soon stay on during taxiing, takeoff and landing. The service is being rolled out on the majority of their long-haul flights, but be warned, the film's soundtrack will still be interrupted for in-flight announcements, so you might want to practice your lip reading.
Well, now you're up to date, we're off for a short break, but do stay with us, because coming up we're off to Rwanda for a trip very much off the beaten tourist track. And Simon's here with his regular travel clinic, this time answering, amongst others, a passenger who got into a tussle over his window blind on a transatlantic flight. Wonder what the outcome was? See you after the break.
Hello and welcome to the Fast Track Travel Clinic with me, Simon Calder. And let's start with Aura Andreasen from Mwanza in Tanzania, who bought a Nairobi-London ticket on Virgin Atlantic. Then the airline announced it was dropping the route.
They offered me a flight on Kenya Airways, but I preferred to switch to British Airways. Virgin refused. I was forced to change the date of the flight, paying a charge of $400. Do I have any rights?
In these difficult days for airlines, Aura, we get news here at Fast Track almost every day about unprofitable routes being cancelled. Your rights when this happens are very limited: a refund or an alternative flight of the original airline's choice. But I've taken your case up with Virgin Atlantic's HQ. They say it's complicated because you booked and changed your date of travel through an agent. You should have been offered more options about a replacement flight, and you should not have been charged a fee, which Virgin has offered to refund. We've sent you through the contact details. Chris Hare from Kent in southeast England is frustrated by his attempt to claim compensation after 2 flights were cancelled by the German airline Lufthansa because of bad weather.
I wrote to the airline to complain. No responsibility was accepted, although I was awarded some frequent flyer points. If my experience is typical, I don't think you should be promoting the European Directive on Passenger Rights as a copper-bottom safeguard for travellers.
Chris, the EU rules on what you can expect when flights are disrupted have never been the answer to every traveller's prayer. If weather, volcanic ash or air traffic control meltdown grounds your flight, you're not entitled to any cash compensation, only a duty of care while the airline seeks to get you to your destination. So the frequent flyer points are more than you could expect and show the potential value of complaining. Ed Gelbstein from Geneva did at least take off, as expected, in the comfort of business class on Swiss international airlines from Zurich to Los Angeles, but his enjoyment of the flight was spoiled by not being allowed that great transatlantic indulgence of looking out of the window.
Immediately after lunch had been served, the cabin staff forced everyone to close the blinds of all the windows until shortly before landing. Does the airline actually have the legal authority to do this, as it's not safety related?
Ed, Swiss told me there's no special policy around window blinds being closed on its flights, but if there is a lot of sunlight in the cabin and other passengers are uncomfortable, cabin crew may kindly ask if they mind closing them, but it's not mandatory. If a passenger wants to keep their blind open throughout the flight, they're more than welcome to. Finally, Bogdan Miklaus writes from Vancouver in the world's second biggest country, Canada, about a prospective trip to the largest, Russia.
My girlfriend and I would like a vacation to Moscow and or St. Petersburg to explore a country I've been fascinated by. But we have some concerns about our safety or simply getting ripped off, starting with the airport.
Bogdan, I've been lucky enough to travel through Russia several times, from the depths of midwinter to the height of summer, and wholeheartedly recommend the country at any time of year. A combination of St. Petersburg and Moscow make an ideal introduction. Sure, there are risks. Foreign Affairs Canada has a risk register ranging from the danger of terrorist attacks on public transport to on-the-spot fines if you take photos of market stalls. Getting a tourist visa is also a tricky business. The best solution? Choose one of the excellent Canadian travel companies specialising in Russia and let them guide you through the challenges. That's all we've got time for in this session at the Fast Track Travel Clinic. From me, Simon Calder, bye for now and see you next time.
Thanks, Simon. Now, to end today, we're going to head to Rwanda, often affectionately known as the land of 1,000 hills. It's a country where the government is actively trying to develop a sustainable, post-conflict eco-tourism industry. Many people head there to see the famous mountain gorillas. But we sent Theopis Garlatos to discover a different side to the country.
Most of Rwanda lies at over 1,500 metres, and its vast expanse of forest, mountains and swamps provides some of the most breathtaking scenery. But despite visitors who marvel at the mountain gorillas and their luscious green habitat, the country is not always considered as a place of beauty or serenity. It's often linked to political unrest, past and present. Just this week, Britain announced it's withholding aid to the country. But Rwanda's tourism industry is determined to distance itself from the country's politics and show its high-end tourists it can offer more than gorillas and genocide museums. And it's focusing on the previously inaccessible area of Nyungwe, Africa's largest mountainous rainforest.
Rwanda is a very active destination. There's numerous activities in Nyungwe forests, which is the south of Rwanda. Then go up along the lake towards the north. Spend some time on the lake, and in a span of about a week, you'll have seen more than you can see anywhere else in that short time.
Rwanda is relatively small, but with today's well-maintained road system of over 9,000 miles, tourists can see much more of the country than before, and in a relatively short period of time. But to really appreciate the landscape, the best way to travel is by air. Covering 970 square kilometres, Nyungwe is Rwanda's largest protected area. I guess this is what is called arriving in style. Wow. In 20 minutes, the helicopter ride from Kigali takes you direct to the area's first and only 5-star eco-lodge in the centre of a tea plantation. Rwanda receives 25,000 high-end tourists each year, who contribute $60 million to the economy. The government hopes that luxury lodges like this will attract more tourists and encourage them to stay in the country for longer. Nyungwe is home to 275 bird species and more than 1,000 different types of plants. But the forest is most famous for its 13 different species of primates.
Normally, Cobus monkeys used to live in 15 individuals in other areas, but here it's like a miracle to see over than 500 individuals which are walking in one group.
Nyungwe is said to be the source of the Nile, and the waterfall trail is one of the area's highlights. It really is amazing, isn't it?
It's really amazing.
It's a long walk to get here.
A long walk, but one of my favorite places.
And not too far away is the Canopy Walk. Built 2 years ago, it's the first of its kind in East Africa, a great chance to witness the forest and its inhabitants at eye level. We're right in the middle of the Canopy Walk. This is exactly 100 metres above the rainforest ground, and it's quite shaky. And obviously not an experience for the faint-hearted.
I'm not doing it.
You see how
I feel
far you can
really
come
sick
out?
up there. Dude, it's in my jeans, okay? I can't do it. I don't want to do it.
Just give it one more try.
I already did. I already went there and I came back.
The private sector hopes more and more people will be willing to give previously unmarketed areas of the country a go. Companies specialising in luxury tourism also say, because of its low volume and high yield, it's the only way to preserve Rwanda's wealth of unspoilt rainforest.
We've got to be able to earn from it to preserve it. So I think luxury tourism being high-end and our volumes being relatively low by virtue of the size of our country, it is the way to go.
With more investment from the private sector, it's hoped there'll soon be more places for those with a sense of adventure to stay right in the heart of the forest. The land with 1,000 hills may be spectacular to look at, but it's even more fun to explore.
Theopiska Latos, exploring parts of Rwanda that tourists seldom get to see. And talking of Africa, next week I'll be in Kenya, finding out if the launch of 2 new low-cost airlines could bring down the cost of flying there. And don't forget, if you've missed any of our recent journeys, you can always catch up on our website, bbc.com/fasttrack, and you'll find links there to our Facebook and Twitter pages as well. But until next time, from me, Fiona Foster, and the rest of the Fast Track team here in rainy old London, thanks for watching and goodbye.